All right, so the committee acknowledges and honours the traditional owners of the ancestral lands upon which we meet today, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and pays its respect to their elders both past and present. So before we begin, could I ask you to please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee, and if there's anyone sitting at the back who will also be giving evidence, could you also come forward and introduce yourselves? So we'll start with you, Ms. Christensen.
Bron Christensen, CEO, Kimberley Pilbara Cattlemen's Association, and I'll introduce Kimberley de Pledge, who's one of our graziers with Kimberley Pilbara Cattlemen's Association.
Okay, thank you.
David Marshall. I'm here representing the Australian Veterinary Association, but with the indulgence of the committee, I'd probably also like to speak to my own direct personal experience as a veterinarian with animal welfare qualifications and raise some issues that I guess veterinarians and others have raised that the association didn't put formally forward.
Okay, all right.
Callum Carruth. I'm here representing the Pastoralists and Graziers Association of Western Australia, along with Tony Seabrook, our president, behind us here. And I'm a grazier from the Midwest of Western Australia.
Okay, thank you.
Steve Maguire, president of WA Farmers Federation, also a farmer from Kojonup, and I'll be speaking to our submission that we submitted to the committee.
Sure, thanks.
Bevan Steele, I'm the president of the WA Firearms Traders Association, representing the dealers in WA.
All right, great, thank you. So now, again, in turn, I now require you to take either the oath or the affirmation, and if the people sitting behind will be giving evidence, I'll need you to come forward and give the oath or the affirmation as well. That should be in front of you.
I think there's one over there.
There you go.
Lovely, thank you.
We do it all together?
All together?
Does that work?
No, we need
Separately?
Yeah, for the purposes of the
Okay,
record,
I
we
go
need you to
first?
do it separately.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I will give before the committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence I will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. So you will have each signed a document entitled Information for Witnesses, and if I could ask you to indicate in turn, did you read and understand that document?
Yes, I read and understood.
Thank you.
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
I did. Yes, read it.
Yes, read and understood.
And again, if you're going to be giving evidence, if you could indicate. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So these proceedings are being recorded by Hansard, and a transcript of your evidence will be provided to you after the hearing. And after the hearing, I'll explain a bit more to you about what that process involves. Please note as well that this broadcast will also be available for viewing online after this hearing. So please advise the committee if you object to the broadcast being made available in this way. Mm-hmm. All right, so before we start with questions, I will get the committee to introduce themselves. So my name is Dr. Katrina Stratton, member of the Legislative Council and chair of the Legislation Committee.
I'm the Deputy Chair, Simon Ehrenfeld, also a member of the Legislative Council.
Rod Caddies, I'm a member of the Legislative Council.
Thank you. Lauren Cayoon, member of the Legislative Council.
Tim Clifford, a member of the Legislative Council.
All right, so this question is specifically for the Kimberley Pilbara Cattlemen's Association and the Pastoralists and Graziers Association. Do you mind if we use acronyms?
No?
Okay, good. It'll save us a whole lot of time. So you both said that you had constructive consultation with WAPOL in the lead up to the Act. So I just wonder if you can describe those consultations for us, and what do you feel you were surprised about then when the bill was published?
Okay.
So perhaps we'll start with you, Ms Christensen.
The Kimberley-Pilbara Cattlemen's Association sat on the Minister's Consultative Committee along with PGA. One of the things we did find is that there was a lot of detail that was further produced as part of the legislation that wasn't included in the Ministerial Committee. Two things that didn't come up was when we spoke about the issue for us about the health checks was going to be access to a doctor, because a lot of our pastoralists are 7-8 hours away from the local medical centre. For example, in Broome, it's 4 or 5 weeks to get an appointment. That was our major concern. And when I did ask that in that committee, I was advised by the Minister that it will just be like a driver's licence. And so we thought, right, there's no issue with that. If you can't see, you shouldn't be firing a gun, that type of thing. So took that to heart. Later on, when the actual legislation came out, and it did talk about mental health checks, that was a surprise to us. And we feel that, as I will speak to in a minute, we feel that that is severely detrimental to the work that we've been doing on mental health with our pastoralists. The second thing that we found, which was for us is fairly minor, was the storage capacity. We're asked what the storage requirements would be, and I was advised that it would be in line with the federal regulations. I have a property in central Queensland. We have guns, and I know that these are vastly different and at sometimes quite extensive for the requirements here in Western Australia. The other things that did come up were the single shot as opposed to rapid fire or semi-automatic, and they were probably the three of the key things that we felt weren't addressed in that consultation, which came up afterwards for us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Cross, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that pretty well covers the main points that we had. I wasn't really involved in the early consultations, so but storage is certainly a big one. And particularly the requirement for alarms. When you've got a remote property, who's going to hear that alarm? The same person who's cutting your safe open with a grinder, or perhaps pulling it out holes through the wall of the farmhouse using your tractor. I think it's been was misrepresented in the early consultations for sure.
Okay.
So, sorry, Chair, on that, aren't alarms back to base? Don't alarms, alerts?
I'm yet to find out, but as far as I know, it's just an audible alarm.
No alarm goes to your phone.
That's the only requirement. They're not required to.
Has to go back to somebody else. There's an Australian standard that it covers, and it has to go back to another recording device, either somebody or neighbours, your phone.
But again, I mean, if you're away
point.
and your property's a long way from town, you're...
But if someone's breaking into your place and after your guns, you're not going to ask your neighbours to go around there. You have to protect the police, and the police could be hours away. So, and I've spoken to the local sergeant about that, and he says, yeah, there's no chance we'd ever get there with, So just for West WA farmers, I've only been in the job since March, so I was involved in the consultation. I've spoken to my predecessor. They were very disappointed how it went. There was no original discussion paper about what the police were actually trying to achieve, rather than just making the community safer, and that's what we've heard. There's no evidence. There was no evidence behind what they proposed would make the community safer. That there was no draft legislation put out, and once legislation came out, there was a commitment there was going to be draft regulations, but that we never saw the draft regulations before regulations were proclaimed. So the whole process was very unsatisfactory. And when they did try to give feedback and consultation process, it was not taken well, shall we say. To be as kind as well. And the way that they were treated by the minister, they thought was quite poor.
So, I'll just acknowledge I'm asking this question as a layperson. A number of submissions express concerns about the cap on firearms that may be held. So, can you explain why any farmer might need more than 10 firearms?
It's probably more if they're also a sporting shooter, and there's other licenses and stuff. A lot of the time, a lot of the guns are actually heirlooms. Like I have a gun, my guns are hand-me-downs. And so they keep them because they're a family weapon, but they probably never use them. Plus, you have different guns for different jobs as well.
So like as a layperson, can you like explain to me what that means, like day to day?
I've got horses. If I want to shoot a rabbit, I use a smaller calibre rifle or a bigger one for an sheep. And if I've got a horse, you need to use a decent sized calibre. You want to do the job properly.
Sure.
Because it's a cruelty thing.
Yeah.
Then if you are shooting at range, you might have a long high-powered rifle for shooting foxes. If you're shooting, other things you might want a shotgun. So I'm not a gun expert. I'm probably these guys are probably more than me, but yeah, there's range of things that we need guns for to do the job properly that you want to do.
And I know you're saying you're not an expert, but we're like part of what we are trying to understand is the day-to-day implications in real life. So I'm very happy for you to answer from that perspective.
Sorry,
and Mr. Steele,
if I could interject, just to help you out with a little bit of stuff. So a modern firearm isn't just a one solution suits all, just much like a motor vehicle. So lots of firearms now are tailored to different varieties of people, shapes and sizes. We've also got a lot of technological advancements in firearms with the introduction of things like thermal and night vision capabilities, which a lot of farmers and pastoralists are using flat out. The downside is those guns can't quite often be used, although the technologies can't be transferable across the range. So pastoralist farmers, my clientele, also, they need to be able to provide a not a cache is the wrong word, but a series of different firearms to suit different people, different physiques, different uses on the farm. So while 10 sounds like it's a lot of firearms for somebody that's not in that arena, somebody that's operating a business that's in the business of either controlling vermin, destroying livestock, they're all different firearms for different reasons. Sporting, as you alluded to, so they don't transcend.
Yeah.
And like I say, you might have old ones like got my mum's 410 for shooting, small things, attacking roses or whatever. So there's guns sitting in there that are old ones.
Sure.
And we like to keep for the family reasons and hand down to families. So that's how the numbers sort of tend to stack up. I'll just make the point with farmers as well is that I made this point before, that sporting shooters and hunters and so on, guns are actually part of their identity. It's part of their sport. For farmers, it's a tool like a chainsaw or a spanner. It is a tool for our business. So we're not invested in it personally as such. As some, a lot of farmers are sporting shooters as well.
Sure.
Hunters,
Yeah.
But for me personally, it's a part of my business. And look, I have purchased a bolt gun, a captive bolt gun, so that my employee can use something to destroy livestock. And that's the way that I've found around it, but they're not cheap either.
Sure.
And they do have limitations. The animal has to be restrained. If it's an animal that's dangerous and thrashing around, you still need a firearm.
Yep.
So even a captive bolt gun, some people see as an alternative. No, the animal has to be restrained. You have to be able to place it against the animal's head. If you can't get close enough, then you can't use it.
Okay. Thank you. Lauren?
Thank you. I just want to unpack that a little bit further. So a number of people that we've sort of spoken to throughout the course of the inquiry have talked about the sort of average numbers of guns, and notwithstanding that's different for different groups of people. But our understanding is the average number of guns is around 3.
Yeah, it's 1.8, I think.
Yeah, so in relation to that sort of limit of 10, I'm just wondering whether you could help us to quantify the sort of number of people that are sort of genuinely impacted by that limit. What sort of proportion of people in your industries are genuinely impacted by that? Is it still the case that most farmers will have under 10, and at certain circumstances where that limit is problematic, or is it more widespread than that?
Well, most will be under 10, but the police would be the best to ask those figures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
From a gun shop owner point of view, because we see this every day of the week, 90% of the people in the bush are over 10, over 5, well and truly, because of the review and people having to be compliant. What people have done in the past is the numbers have shifted. The same number of guns are there. They've just gone and got their wife to get a licence. So typically, where the farm homestead would hold all the firearms under dad, and the kids would use the firearms as they needed for the business and business purposes. Those kids now, the numbers have split down. So instead of dad having 15 guns, dad's got 10, the oldest son's got 2, the next daughter's got 3. So that the numbers are still there, it's just in a different format.
Okay.
There are a number of other problems with the legislation. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just thinking the same. Can we? Numbers are fine. That's an easy fix, but I think there's more important issues that we should be discussing.
There is, and one thing I'd like to reiterate is something I believe you've already heard from the Australian Medical Practitioners Association, is that this Firearms Act of 2024 has set back the cause of mental health in the bush by 2 decades.
True.
There is no way you are going to get people, particularly men, to go and talk about anxiety or problems they're having, if they believe that their firearms that they need for their work or for their primary source of recreation often as well are going to be taken off them if they so much as mention feeling stressed or anxious. And that is...
So can I just ask, is there evidence that people aren't seeking medical assistance because of the legislation?
Yes,
I can guarantee you they are.
absolutely.
To prove that
No
something's
one's-
not happening.
No one's going to say a word.
We're at our conference
Well,
last...
but,
sorry.
yeah, but we have to make decisions based on the evidence in front of us as well. So, I'm just asking if there is any
Yep.
clear evidence that people are not seeking.
A good example for us is last year, we've had mental health as part of our conference panel for the last couple of years because it is so important. Farming is one of the highest, males in farming are one of the highest suicide rates. And I'm currently organising a conference which is happening at the end of next year. I talked to people about going on a mental health panel again, talking about their challenges, and they've all declined because they don't want to say publicly, we've had a mental health issue, because they're worried about their licences. So absolutely. And it's I talked to the representative of Men's Health, a non-for-profit that works in rural Western Australia, and I spoke to him at the Fitzroy Bull Sale, and he just said it has just put them so far back and undermined the work that they have done for the last few years, just from the feedback he's getting from men who are sort of saying, mate, no, won't be talking to anyone.
So what would be the solution to that?
I understand where this is coming from, but as we were saying outside, there's a nominal number of cases, and I've got this in us that we actually support the Division of General Practitioners when they're saying that it's not possible to pick whether someone comes in with depression or someone comes in with any mental illness, whether they are more likely to do a violent act than someone who has not seen a doctor, who does not present with those issues. And so we certainly agree with that if the doctors are saying it's not possible for them to pick, and in all honesty, if I was a GP and I spent so long studying and someone came in with depression and I was worried about them, I would be covering my backside to say, no, they shouldn't have a firearm licence.
So is the solution you're suggesting no medical checks at all?
Not no medical checks, but certainly taking the onus off the GPs to actually make that decision whether you're suitable to have a firearm or not. There has been incidents in the past, but if you look at the number of firearms that are out there, when there wasn't a mental health check with it, there hasn't been enough, and they're terrible incidents, but there hasn't been a significant number of incidents to warrant putting that onus on GPs.
So the New Zealand model has been held up by our submission with WFF, where it's community-based reporting, where if people feel that their neighbours are under undue amount of stress. But we also have clear indications that, for instance, the Floret shooting recently, there were 7 reports made to the police about that fellow, about him having ammunition for guns that were on his collector's licence that he shouldn't have possessed, about him making threats, and all of that was ignored. And so the feeling in the community, the firearms community, is that we're being punished for the failure of policing. It's not a failure of the Act or a failure of the law as such, it's a failure of policing. And that the knock-on effect is actually punishing the law-abiding firearms.
The legislation was well in play before those homicides. I will just, establish that. Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And just remind you all, if any of you need to swap out with someone in the aisle, you can do that at any time. So just to not move on from numbers, and I do notice the Bron Christensen's remark that there were more important issues than numbers, so interested to hear those, but a lot of people have raised the numbers, so I do want to drill on this numbers question because it's even if not for you, it seems to be a big feature. So the first one is the comment that was made that they were just splitting the numbers by putting 3 in the kid's name and all that sort of thing. That is something I want to ask about. If there are large numbers of firearms, are people splitting it, like getting their mate to hold 20 and someone else to hold 10 and so forth, in different safes or places? With the way you expressed it, can they hold them all in the same place? So are they allowed? Are you saying they're allowed? I didn't think they could. That someone could say, well, I hold 5 and someone else holds 3 and someone else holds 4, but they're all kept at the same name and address. I didn't think that was...
Under the requirements, and again, without having the legislation right in front of me. I believe cohabitating people can store firearms together in the same place.
So you're saying the legislation doesn't restrict the number of firearms
Not at
in one place, it's
not
per
at a location,
person?
correct. Yeah,
Well,
but,
okay.
but for a person they do.
Okay, that's very interesting. And I suppose one of the concerns, because there's clearly, I think, community support for limitations on numbers, and some of you have raised the point, for example, a farmer could also be a collector, could be a sporting shooter. Someone might shoot rabbits plus other types of wildlife. Vermin or whatever. So is there a way of, would you suggest a regime that restricts that? Yes, you're allowed X number as a collector, Y number as a, as a farmer, so many as a sporting shooter, because what people certainly don't want is people to then just bypass the system and just say, I'm all these things, and then they can suddenly have 50 firearms. So
I think with all due respect, sir, the number of firearms is a argument that holds very little merit. It's the person. If he's got one firearm, or she, if they've got one firearm and they're not the right person for that firearm, whether they've got 1 or 50 is immaterial. I think a substantive storage arrangement is probably better implemented than a number itself. So if the risk to public is that those firearms get stolen, then that's the risk, and we need to look at mitigating that risk with proper risk management, as opposed to holistically looking down on a numbers-based argument per the person. Because that person's either a good person that can have a firearm, or they're a bad person they shouldn't have any. Whether they've got 1 or 50 is immaterial.
The question is, where's the evidence that reducing the number of firearms per person is going to make the community safer? There is no evidence for that. We've been asked to justify why we should have it. Surely it's up to the government to justify why we shouldn't. And they have not done that. They've never been able to show any evidence that reducing the number of firearms an individual can own is any way going to make the community safer. As been said, it is one person, one gun does the damage.
Yeah,
so it's really an issue if you're getting guns stolen. And then we actually did ask the police at one point, asked a couple of times, what percentage of firearms are stolen from locked safes? And they couldn't answer that question. That to me is the first question to ask, because when they're talking about safes and upgrading safes, that doesn't mean a thing if they're being stolen from underneath someone's bed or on top of the cupboard, or they've been stolen from an unlocked safe. Are they actually being stolen from locked safes? And even if you upgraded that safe and made heavier steel, can they still get into it? Because I live on a farm. There's a shed there with sledgehammers and angle grinders. Okay, a heavier steel locked safe will mean that they will get in there in 8 minutes rather than 5 minutes. Yes. And if I'm an hour away, that doesn't make a difference.
So through the chair, the question that's being asked, if you've watched other public hearings on this, they're saying there's no question about what the good legal firearms owners are doing, but ultimately the allegation is that legal firearms become illegal firearms if and when they're stolen. And if there's a very large cachet of them to steal, then that's, instead of 10 weapons out there on the market, it can become 50. Are you saying that there hasn't been?
Well, not many people own 50 firearms, I don't think. But.
No, but are you saying there haven't been thefts?
No, I'm not saying there hasn't been, but when we actually asked the police how many firearms are being stolen from a locked safe, so someone's done everything right, and it does happen, we know it happens, but what percentage of firearms that are on the market have been stolen from a locked safe? They could not answer that question.
And we've now got built-in mitigation for those thefts as well in the regulations. We've got things like CCTV cameras that have to be installed in certain circumstances and alarms. So that gives either a deterrent method for those criminals that weren't regulated before, or a detection for police, law enforcement to go and find the perpetrator that is committing these rural offences, going house to house. It gives the police an evidence chain and somewhere to track, and we can put them back to the judiciary and stop that. So it's a bit of creeping excellence. We want to have increased safe storage, we want to have CCTV, we want to have alarms, and then we also want to limit people the ability to do what they need to do with what they need to do.
Right, Chair, when I get my next turn, I'll come back and ask about the mental health part.
Sure,
Yeah, thanks.
sure. Sorry, Tim, sorry, if I, yeah.
Yes, you mentioned before that there, with the change of technology, with night sights and all that kind of stuff, that that could potentially impact the nature of the limit with firearms, with people returning their firearms and so forth. Do you have evidence of people trading back in firearms because of the limitation on 10? Because they're needing to update their weapons to be more contemporary to use new modern technology?
The firearms are bought and sold and traded through the time period.
Yeah.
So there's now, if the limits, the number limits, so for a recreational, a hunter, sorry, the terminology's changed, for a hunter, they've got 5. So those people are traditionally engaged and enjoy their sport quite a lot, and they'll go out and hunt on pastoralists and graziers' properties and farming properties. Those people certainly have traded in firearms to be under the number. And I've got a lot of primary producers down in my way that certainly have changed numbers around, like I said, to make sure that they fall within the specified legislation.
And just a quick follow-up question in regards to mental health. You mentioned you raised concerns around the going to the doctor and getting that assessment. We've heard that that even though there might be questions raised by some health professionals, that they do agree there needs to be some sort of checks and balance. Do you agree that there needs to be some sort of check from a mental, like any sort of health professional?
Well, it's so great. I mean,
Yeah.
if you ask a farmer, have you been anxious?
Yeah.
Well, yes.
Yep.
I got hit by a sheep the other day. The sheep got out, the cattle got out. I mean, like, every day. Did you get angry with an animal? Well, yeah. I mean, where's the point where you say you can't have a gun? Because, I mean, I don't know if you've experienced with agriculture, but it's not an easy job, and there's a lot to worry about. And so trying to define that, yeah, he's anxious and he has anxiety or depression or an issue. I mean, have you felt a bit sad? Yeah, well, did you see sheep prices last year? I mean, I got to the point last year where I was looking at shooting a lot of sheep. Fortunately, it rained, and that stopped it. I was not happy, okay? It was not good. And if I'd gone to a doctor then, he would have taken the gun off me, So
do you think a GP, though, has the capacity and the training to assess the difference between stress and an enduring...
There's not very many GPs in the bush who have English as their first language, for a start. And a lot of them have not been in the country very long. You're asking them to assess... No, that's the point, though. Yeah, I mean, they do have the training, but if you've got a GP straight out of the city, they would put every farmer in a mental in an asylum, just about, they're not that experienced in dealing with it.
Yes.
Through you, Madam Chair.
Sorry, can I just, because we have heard that all at once that it's the person who's the problem, not the firearm, but also a desire for there to be no universal assessment. So how do we reconcile that and ensure that people have the tools that they need to do their job? Because I absolutely appreciate what you're saying. These are tools to do your job and protect community safety.
Well,
Dr. Marshall.
Just to answer that question, we have put out submissions about the New Zealand model.
Sure, yeah.
I guess I'd just observe that I think one of the conundrums here, and it seems to be very much, particularly with some of the issues I'd like to raise separately later, but that implementation is a huge concern around what's going on. And I think when you talk about a mental health assessment as it stands in the legislation, the question is what does that actually mean? What does that mean? Is that the GP suggesting that you might be depressed, or is that you have such an impairment that you're seeing a psychologist and a specialist makes that determination? That, I think, is the question and the conundrum, because where's the line? And that's what's not been helpful, I think, with a lot of what's been going on. And it's interesting, even in the process since putting in the first submission, there's been at least a lot more information put out by the transitions team, and that's been really helpful. And, for example, recently there was at least some guidance on what firearms are going to suit what size property. I mean, that was enormously helpful, just when you don't know what it means. And I think that, to me, seems to be one of the big issues around the mental health question. What's that mean? What's the line? Where's the problem? When is it a problem and not a problem? I think that's what everyone's struggling with, I think, to some extent.
So it's an issue of implementation and communication.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, if you could reassure people that going to the doctor and talking about whether you're feeling a bit low or whatever is not going to result in that, that it needs to be that you've got some serious mental illness, that may be more likely to be associated with it, or serious anger issues or something. But again, I'm not a mental health expert, so,
Yeah.
And just on the GP, some are offering the service and some aren't. So
What was that, sorry?
Not all GPs are offering the service of one guy. So you're going away from your GP to another GP because you've never met before in your life. Surely the GP that is your GP is the best person to assess you and to even treat you, but they don't want to do it because they're worried it's going to push you away, which is kind of, and just what Ron said, we have spent so much time and effort trying to get farmers and people to open up about mental health. I've lost mates who shot themselves. Okay, it's terrible, absolutely terrible, and we don't want to be driving, and it's done so much to get these people in. This is just going to drive them out, and it's just shocking. It is. The first thing you do is not do bad, and this is counterproductive, and that's the worst thing at all. Yep.
Rod.
I can't remember what the other questions were now, but some of the stuff we're talking about, obviously the mental health side and all that, but I note in some of the submissions, and people have been emailing me about disqualifying offences, and how I think it's in, I don't know if it's the firearms traders one.
We can talk to that as well. Disqualifying offences needs a very big revision. Whilst the intent is to stop bad people from accessing firearms, it's looping up people through all sorts of stuff. There's conditional agreement orders, which falls under the VRO Act, which is not it's not a violence act. Steve could leave here and apply to the magistrate to get one on me. I lose my firearm straight away, and it's nothing. It's nothing. It's just an agreement that you both sign. So coincidentally, I've got a farmer down my way that was charged with some animal welfare charges for not destroying livestock quick enough with his firearm. He's now lost his firearms. There's a whole lot of penalties that people are getting from things like a damage offence, a criminal damage offence, but it's been heard at a local magistrates court, so it's a very low end of the crime spectrum. They've been given a community-based order when they were 18. They can't have a firearm for 10 years and they're losing their firearms and access to firearms. So, there's a whole lot of, whilst the intent is honourable and we accept the intent, the practical application of that rolling out has shown and highlighted that there's a lot of little issues within that system.
Madam
and it needs
Chair,
a revisit.
May I add to that? And that's one of our key issues, which for us is probably one of the key issues for us, as opposed to, I know numbers and everything else are important, but the mandatory disqualifying offences and orders, where we're finding that our pastoralists are being swept up in this, and we agree that anything with a serious or a violent crime, absolutely. But we're finding that likes of traffic accidents, workplace accidents are actually being swept up in that as well. Where, for example, and I'm actually going to ask Cobb or Kimberley de Pledge to come and tell his story. He's one of the people who's actually been affected by it, so I'll let him tell his story best.
Would you like to
Thank you.
come forward?
Look, it's not really much of a story, but obviously I was incarcerated for just on 2 years from a traffic accident, and in my mind, the troops that were in charge didn't do what they were supposed to do, but anyway, the end result was I was in the clink. So now I don't qualify to have a rifle or a licence of any sort, and we're obviously, as a pastoralist, we're trying to run a business, and there's all kinds of scenarios, but at any time you need a rifle to destroy something, or there's people that are on the public roads that have hit something, and currently as it stands, my guns, I had to hand them in. I gave them to the local guy in Carnarvon, but when you get the email to say we're coming to seize your weapons, like, a shotgun and a 223, like, it's a big coup. They got Cobb's guns. He's nasty. So I think it's really important that just because we've been in green doesn't necessarily need to come up that we're the end of the world. I mean, we employ people from all around the world. We owe money to banks. We pay taxes. We do all these things. And some, this, not really sure the right words to call it, but it doesn't make sense just to say, Cobb, you can't have a rifle anymore. But we need it under the Pastoral Act, to run your business. It's because it's, well, I can run out there with a stone at the minute and dong a cow, but currently there's no rifle on Yannery Station. So is the Onslow Police going to come out and destroy something that's, we're all capable of doing it ourselves?
So what's the change you'd like to see?
Well, I think it's whoever it comes before. It's like, oh, all right. Well, he's been inside, but for what? Okay, it was a traffic accident. I think it should be an automatically. Oh, he's fine. Just carry on. So you've taken that power away under this new act, but it's not. You can't apply to the commissioner or whoever to say that.
So the change you'd like to see is like an individual assessment of people who...
We put that in ours as well, is that you should be able to apply to the commissioner or someone like that at his discretion to override that and know you have a licence. That's simply it. Yeah. There should be some mechanism to appeal against it, apply against it.
It's like a simple one too,
Yes.
Madam Chair. It's not, it could come into a situation where, we're going under the Animal Welfare Act without one, and there's vermin and it's difficult to explain because we're not articulate, but when you're in the bush, you need certain things, and that's the top priority.
Yeah. Okay.
Madam Chair, might I just say a word? Please acknowledge one of the bravest people I know. 5 minutes before the accident, it was a road train carting cattle. He had no intention whatsoever of committing a criminal offence. The dignity and the bravery shown here by Cobb is astonishing. Please acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah.
Thank you, and sorry, we don't know the background, but I do appreciate that you stepped forward and shared your personal experience.
Thanks, Tony.
So I absolutely do acknowledge that.
It's sort of immaterial, but it's in my mind it's quite simple now to write. Well, okay, that's put that over there or whatever.
Yeah. And these are the things that we are trying to understand because, there has been a lot of speculation, and so we are really trying to understand what has been the real-world impact. So I thank you because your story is exactly one of those real-world impacts. So I do appreciate
you. Yeah, that's no worries.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, may I just add something to that?
Yeah, just wait until you... Yeah.
Just when you asked what the alternatives would be, I guess for us what we'd be looking at is, and as I said, absolutely serious violent crimes, absolutely. In Cobb's case, he cannot have a licence for 22 years because it's 10 years, and 2 years that he actually served. What we're saying is that the assessment should be there, but split out the violent crimes from the non-violent crimes, and the character should be taken into account, as well as that we have examples of pastoralists and traditional owners who, when they were young and silly, were involved in something that might have been a more violent misdemeanour. They've served their time, they've gone on to be respectable members of the community, and they also are being ongoingly punished because of the structure of this law. So absolutely, we agree with violent crimes, absolutely. But if we can split out those violent crimes from, let's look at what the actual offence was, let's look at the character of the person, let's look at the rehabilitation of the person, rather than just a blanket maximum sentence. And I guess the other thing that we've also, one of our key points is that there is no comeback now from the Act. The Act supersedes everything else. There is now not the opportunity for those outliers, I guess, or those exceptional circumstances to actually put a case forward for it. And that's probably one of our other asks is to recommend that the capacity for a appeal to a commissioner be introduced.
And so who would make that assessment of character? Because again, I'm trying to understand, don't want the universal assessment by GPs, but in this instance, yes, an assessment of character. So who would make that assessment of character in a way that would be acceptable to stakeholders?
For us, we thought it would come back to basically your police record, in that if you are 20 years old and had a violent crime, which is not Cobb's case, if you're 20 years old and had a violent crime, you're now 40 and you have had no other things with the police, there's character references, there's everything else. you've done your time. Do you need to be punished twice? In the cases such as Cobbs or other pastoralists who perhaps have been incarcerated for workplace accidents, splitting those out. So looking at the violent crime as the mandatory sentence that you're looking at, rather than just looking at the time. So looking at the actual crime, changing the legislation so it looks at the crime, what was committed, rather than the time that you actually
the commissioner
served.
of the day.
Yeah, either that or maybe the officer in charge of gun licensing, maybe, or deputy commissioner.
Yeah, but
But maybe the commissioner might have to sign off at the end.
I mean, the optimum thing would be the change in the legislation so that it actually looks at that component as opposed to the holistic time served. But certainly having that right of appeal would be a wonderful addition.
Lauren.
Thank you, and thank you for what has been a very useful discussion around some of the mental health and offence restrictions. I'm conscious of the time, and I am keen to hear some of the issues that no doubt Dr. Marshall has been wanting to discuss. So, just to change tack a little. In some of our previous hearings, we've heard from witnesses who have expressed some concern about the ability to shoot animals on the roadside, for example. And in your submission, you've recommended a new class of business licence for vets. I just wonder if you can give us some background on the sorts of concerns expressed by vets, the difficulties being faced, and if we could try and sort of distinguish between what has been an implementation problem and perhaps what is a continuing problem.
Yeah, I guess that whether it's a implementation problem or a long-term problem, we're still teasing out.
Mm-hmm.
Very hard to tell. I guess obviously what the association is looking for is a relatively straightforward way that veterinarians who want to hold firearms for the use of euthanasia of animals can do that relatively easily. That's certainly not proving to be the case at the moment. When we looked at the legislation, and other vets have done this independently of myself, it seemed that the business licence category was the logical category, given that it defines euthanasia and sedation of animals. We've had one vet that I recently spoke to said that when they applied for that, they've actually been steered into applying for a primary producer's licence because they happen to own a farm themselves. The question and concern we have around that is what protection is there then for euthanasing an animal on another property? I personally have sort of inquired about a business licence and have been steered down the hunting permission because my own property has qualified for hunting permission. And just got an email yesterday saying, and then you just get a temporary hunting permission when you want to euthanize an animal on a property. Well, that doesn't work if it's on a roadside, and it doesn't work if it's on often a hobby farmer's property that doesn't have a hunting permission or property isn't registered. So, and it's creating a lot of kind of logistics and administration around what historically has been a pretty straightforward kind of act. I guess from our members using their firearms to euthanize animals, it's generally been regarded if you do it sensibly, then you're kind of okay. And the scenarios in which that can happen can vary a lot. Another issue for us is that we want, or often we're using it fairly intermittently. So it's very much a last resort option. If we can use a lethal injection or a captive bolt, then that's what people will do. But there are certain circumstances in which that's not appropriate or not safe. And some of those will occur on places like roadsides, etc. If you're called out to deal with a livestock rollover or a horse float rollover, something like that. And then it's accessing appropriate firearms. So again, in my own circumstance, my property's been approved for a 22 long rifle. I hold a 22 Hornet as well, which from Bevan's point of view is probably very antiquated. It doesn't get used very much. It speaks to a different era, which probably gives away how old I am, why I've got it. But I pretty much hold that because, from a ballistics point of view, that's acceptable to euthanize anything pretty much up to a bull. And I have it there because I probably held it because of my profession. I don't use it very frequently. I happen to also be a volunteer firefighter, and am conscious that those sorts of emergency instances are when suddenly you need it. And it's all very well to say, well, we'll call in a professional shooter, but he's off out the back of what getting kangaroos for pet food or whatever he's doing. It's about having people who have the expertise and the capability and are accessible, I guess. And I guess vets are in a bit of a unique position to both assess and then also perform the euthanasia. And sometimes, speaking to members, one of our members in Mount Barker, just in recent years, he attended the Tenderden fires, euthanased, in his estimate, a couple of thousand animals on that occasion. And last year attended a truck fire, so brakes had got hot and set the truck afire. So he was euthanasing cattle on, Albany Highway. So, I think what we really want is protection such that, we can get that. And then...
Sorry, can I just ask, did you get the opportunity to suggest this category of licence to Waypole at all during the development?
No.
No, okay.
No. So we've had zero consultation with our profession. Okay. I guess as a firearms owner myself, I flagged it with our profession relatively early on, but there wasn't a lot of kind of interest. I didn't think that it would particularly affect us because there was a lot of talk around numbers of guns and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And this is where this implementation thing comes in. I mean, if either it was straightforward to get the business category, that would probably suit our members fine, the professional shooter's licence.
Mm-hmm.
It's an odd way to put it when you're a vet to be a professional shooter, but if you want to look at the legislation, if there was a straightforward way for us to access that, that would work. Or, as I read the legislation, there was a section that the minister could prescribe veterinarians and veterinary businesses. And then I probably didn't make it clear, we just need to make sure we've got access to appropriate calibers of firearms, because that's a limitation in my case. I can get a hunting licence for a small one, but I can't get a licence for one that I would need ideally to destroy larger animals. And then separately speaking, independently of the associations myself, but having spoken to, obviously numerous people, I think we would also like to see a protection put in, whether that's a defence or some other mechanism in the Act, that any person, regardless of their occupation, if they have a firearm with them and they use it in good faith safely to euthanase an animal because that's what needs to be done, that they be protected from prosecution.
Yeah.
Because there's crazy things at the moment. If a horse float rolls over in the front of Steve's place and they can't shift the horse onto Steve's property, he can't shoot it while it's on the road.
That roadside.
So I'll give you an example of this evidence. For instance, I've heard about third hand where someone's rung the phone number. I've hit an animal, I've hit a kangaroo, it's injured. They've rung the DBCA phone number, and of course, middle of the night, it's weekend or whatever, and finally someone said, I'll ring the police. They've rung the police and waited 45 minutes to an hour for the police to come destroy an injured animal. That's not acceptable. We do not want to see injured animals thrashing around in pain, waiting for someone who is legally, under these laws, to come and dispose of that animal, when a farmer next door could walk out with his gun and just get the job done. And that is an excellent suggestion of David's, that there should be a good faith clause in there. I think that's an excellent idea.
I think some of this falls into categories of, out in the country, things just get done, right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is there's an official wildcare offline number, and there's the Albany Ranges where I live, but out of hours you're lucky if you're going to get hold of someone. So from time to time, a few times a year, I'll end up getting a call because it's gone to, someone's tried the Rangers, tried DBCA, called the vet on call. The vet on call knows that I've got firearms, gives me a ring, says there's a kangaroo with a broken leg out on Gull Rock Road, and I go out and deal with it. I don't charge anyone, I don't do anything for it. And I think the same would apply to farmers and others. If they see a situation that needs dealing with, they deal with it. So in many ways, society's getting a pretty good free service kind of out of that. And I guess my concern is how we're going to manage that if we're not going to allow that free service to continue in a way, and for people to use common sense when, there's a situation that needs dealing with.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Seabrook.
Do we only have 5 more minutes?
1:15 we're finishing, and probably just after 10 o'clock I'll ask you for any closing statements.
The PGA were very heavily involved with the legislation as it was being drawn up. We were filtered out of it towards the end of that period. When it came to regulations, we were not there at all, and the legislation clearly shows that there was no serious consultation with the people, like vets and practitioners. Just out of interest, my high-powered rifle is a 1918 303. The ammunition I'm using is branded to 1940, so don't think I'm as old as that. I'm not, but it does the job. That's all it needs to do. So look, I had a long conversation with Commander Panea, who's leading the police operation here, and Ken Walker. I asked a question: how many illegal firearms? Oh, he's gone. How many illegal firearms are there in circulation? 240,000. Now, I'm not sure whether it's WA or Australia-wide, but he offered up the figure of 240,000 illegal firearms. What are we doing to bring them into the system? Now, my understanding is there's probably going to be close to $100 million spent to cure a problem that doesn't exist. So if I can take you back, there was a shooting out in Margaret River. It was a licensed firearm, and I spoke to someone that knew the fellow quite well, and I was told there was no way in the world that he would have not passed a psychological test to have a firearm. No way. The shooting at the multiplex, that was an assassination. He'd have found that weapon no matter what happened. There was no way he would have avoided that. We've also discussed the husband and the mother and daughter who were shot in a police failure. That was a licensed firearm as well. So I'm just trying to work out what the problem is that we're trying to resolve here for the $100 million that's probably going to be spent to do this, when you talk about a tiny handful of deaths that were carried out by people that probably would have done it anyway, even under the current new legislation. If you contextualise that with a road toll, an average of 175 people a year dying on the roads, and we haven't even got one person a year being shot illegally by licensed firearm owners. So I can't see why we're so heavily involved in spending so much money trying to resolve a problem that doesn't need to be solved, having failed to consult seriously with all the people around the table here and the entire industry, because this is clunky legislation. And my suggestion to the Minister would be just put it in abeyance, hold off, sit down and talk to all of us in the way we're talking today, and let's get some legislation in place that is fit for purpose. Because what you can see here clearly today is we're having legislation thrown at us that is not fit for purpose.
Right, I'm going to take that as a statement because
No, that's fine.
the committee doesn't take questions.
But it needs to be said.
And it will be clear that our terms of reference aren't about the process of the legislation, and they're not also about the policy of the legislation. We're trying to understand the legislation and its impact. So, Simon.
Yeah, Chair. So thank you. And but on the back of what the Chair has just said, what I really want to know, because time is limited, but you can do that in your closing statements if you like, but I think that you must have had a sense by now that some sort of revised legislation is here to stay. But of course, that's all subject to
Let's make a point
what
about
the
that.
committee does.
The
And
police keep on saying the legislation's not going to change. I'm pretty sure the police don't make
Well,
legislation. It's a parliament that does
we're
that.
not saying that Parliament does decide that.
Yeah, well,
At the end of the day,
sure about
we want to know from you the absolute number one things that you think can be fixed that would still have community acceptance. That's absolutely what I want to hear. But just think about that for
Can I
you.
just talk about, because we haven't talked about it here, because we've got farmers here, and this is the one thing, is about the way that farmers have to register their properties.
Yeah.
Has been very involved. It seems that the police seem to think that every farmer farmed the land that he owned in his own name. Farms are owned in trusts, companies, grandparents, cousins, relatives. They're leased, they're share farmed. I don't farm an acre, it's in my name. And it's very complex, the ownership structures. I've been talking to bankers, accountants, saying we've got farmers ringing us up. We need because guess what? My title deeds I don't have my title deeds. The bank has them. Because we all owe money, lots of it, and so it's very, very complex ownership structures of farming land. And so the way that trying to put that information, it's got better and it's got easier with the portal, but just a complete lack of understanding of how ownership's land. And to get the hunting licences. And what has happened, and this has been a lot of problem, if you want to get on the implementation, I'll just say straight up, I did have a meeting with the Commissioner about a month ago, and I said the biggest mistake you made, I think, was actually try and do all this in one, well, not the biggest, they tried to do this in 1 year. What they've actually tried to do, I don't think was actually feasible. I don't think it could actually done what they tried to do. To try and shift 80,000 licences over in 1 year onto an electronic portal, even if the portal was fit for purpose, which it wasn't, and still probably isn't, it is a nightmare. They tried to shift everyone in 1 year. They should have tried to shift the primary producers over first, get all the primary producers, all the land into the system, because what the problem you had someone who had a hunting licence, their licence fell due in April. They rung up a farmer, his licence doesn't fall due to November, and he's had to go and put all his info in early because he needs his gun licence and he can't get it because he hasn't got his data in there. So, a huge amount of stuff trying to get in, and the portal wasn't fit for purpose. So the way that and the regulations are about the way they're trying to capture the land and who owns it, all they want to know is the person giving that right to hunt on their property allowed to do that? The right person to do it. That's all they need. But the way they've tried to do that is just so complicated, has caused so much problem, and they're now employing 120 people on this portal, at God knows what cost, to try and get this done. And it's just been too hard. And they're sort of working their way through it and getting better and better. But our recommendation was that this should have been trialled. The portal should have been trialled. We have our own portal we have problems with. Our CEO, Trevor Whittington, worked for Fisheries when they put their portal in. It's taken, 7, 8 years? And they didn't even trial the portal. They just made it live bang, and the thing was hopeless and a word go. So how they deal with the property information, how that's put in, most blocks have just block numbers, but they don't want that. They want folio and all sorts of details. All livestock farmers have a PIC code, which is a primary identification code, for biosecurity reasons, which the Ag Department has. If I just said to someone, here's a PIC number, bang, that's it. Now, grain growers don't have it, but they probably should. But most properties do. Because every time someone wants to come and shoot on my property, I have to send them a text with all these details. And they want all these folio numbers and land numbers. And some farms are made up of 50 blocks, 60 blocks, because they're all old 100-acre blocks or whatever. So what do? You're supposed to reel all them off? So it's just become extremely complicated.
So Steve explained to me the problems he had trying to make this work. And I thought, it can't be that hard. I'll have a go. Well, I'm reasonably computer literate. My wife is much more so than I am. I had to give up. I could not navigate my way through that system. I haven't completed it yet. I'm still trying to work out what to do. I'm somewhat of a feeling I might just grab the whole lot. I can't go to a local police station. I may be able to go to Canning Vale and say, look, here's all my stuff. You do it, because I've wasted too much of my time on this. It's so unbelievably complex. And what Steve's just enunciated, these roadblocks, and a lot of people will hand their firearms in because they are unable to navigate the portal. They don't want to appear stupid and say, okay, I give up. So they'll hand their firearms in because of the complexity of this portal. Now, I have a road train driver's licence, multi-combination, as Cobb does. I make an appointment to see the doctor. In 3/4 of an hour, I'm done. Cost me $300, and I can stand on one leg, and I can see out of both eyes, and I can breathe, and I've passed. And that's what this should have been, because the concept of putting a liability on a medical professional to determine whether you're a fit person to own a firearm, there's blowback from that. And most of them won't want to do that, because if someone says, this is a sane and appropriate person, and then they go away and do something, well, who created the assessment? Who said it was okay? The complexity of something that ought to have been simple enough to go into your local police station and say, these are the weapons I've got, this is what I use them for, here's a copy of one of my titles, and I'm a prime producer. Now, we've got 14 titles in our farm, and I've actually got the damn things too, but that's another story. I used the biggest title we've got because this was nice and simple, and that's fine. And then my son John did the same thing. He got knocked back because that title's already been used. So what do I have to do? Get him to take one of our 50-acre titles to go through the process? I would defy any of you in the panel here today to sit down with me and navigate your way through this. And all I want is some firearms in a cabinet that I can use.
So we in our submission 2.2, we mentioned that about family members being able to use the firearms on the farm, because obviously you're not always there or whatever, and all these regulations and stipulations. Can I make a quick point? Premier comes out and says, we want to reduce red tape. Every politician goes out and talks about reducing red tape. And then we turn around and there's this truck backing up, tipping red tape on top of us. A lot of this is red tape. A lot of this regulation.
And so,
There's lots of little bits and pieces.
Sorry,
but
I'm
it
just
is
aware
red
that,
tape. Yes.
Lauren, you've got a question, and then we will turn to closing statements.
My point is, the government says one thing, you can talk the talk, let's walk the walk, let's reduce red
Right,
tape.
so if Lauren can ask a
Thank you.
question.
I just wanted to briefly discuss, in the time we've got left, a little bit more about implementation, which is a key plank of the committee's scope. We've heard from other people appearing that there's been a lot of misinformation that's circulated in firearms communities that has given people perhaps some angst, and that perhaps the suggestion that has been made is that might be because people are going to different places for different information. So I just wondered if you could give us some information and your experience of where people go for information. Is it primarily Waypol? We've heard that it's sometimes Facebook pages of different shooting groups, that it's sometimes the Bush Telegraph. What information is still lacking? What misconceptions out there, if you can let me finish, sorry, what misconceptions still need to be dispelled, and what recommendations you might have for government about how to communicate the new rules more effectively to firearm owners?
Well, disinformation becomes because you have a vacuum of knowledge, because the Waypol did put information out there. Now, we have in our submission that, and the actual, we took this to the Commissioner and they've liked this and looking at it, there's actually a booklet that you can put next to your computer while you're going through the system that lays out quite clearly the information that we need, that one wants to do it. And even if you just get it down online or whatever, but there was an absence of information and everything was so great. Firearms are incredibly, I don't know if you'll be seeing this, it's incredibly complex. You've got calibers, you've got rate of fire, you've got hunters, you've got sporting shooters, you've got farmers, you've got vets. Very, very, very complex, this legislation, okay? And that's why it's so much grey that there's all the, people in good faith are saying things that might not be true. They're saying good faith.
Can I address that just quickly, Lauren? The firearms traders across WA spread from Esperance to Kununurra and everywhere in between. We are one of the sole points of contact for every firearms user group. Everyone will transcend a shop. From the moment this legislation dropped, people were lined outdoors trying to get information. The dealers had none. The dealerships, the people that are giving the information on the daily had no information other than the regulations that we had to try and decipher ourselves. No one in the firearms industry is a lawyer. No one is update. We read various parts of legislation that control our businesses. We need to, much like the farming community. But there was no information. There was no packages. Conversely, when the government flipped and put a knife ban on, under 18s can't buy knives, for example. As a retailer, I got a nice little brochure that was easily accessible in plain English of what I had to do to the consumer and what I had to do as a retailer. None of that was ever afforded in this rollout of the legislation.
As time's gone on, because obviously that was some time ago now, do you feel that you're now equipped with that information, or are there things
There's still been no packages handed out. There's the WA Police have got a frequently asked questions page, which is a little bit convoluted. It doesn't carry every scenario. We, the Dealers Association, through our networks, have managed to work various parts of the legislation out as we've gone, in good faith with the people that come through the shops. How do we navigate this? How do we navigate that? The problem is exponential because it's new legislation. We don't understand the intent or the interpretation behind a lot of it because it wasn't properly debated in the upper house or the lower house for that matter. So we're kind of just flying by the seat of our pants, opening a book, trying to read the regulations and go, how does that apply to me? And then and converse back. There's no easy cheat sheet for the layperson to go, right, I'm a firearms user, this is what it means to me.
If I could be slightly positive, I think there's certainly been huge issues with the complexity of legislation. If you start and you're trying to read that and the regulations and get your head around, different scenarios, it's really difficult. I would say that the information sheets that they've been producing on the Transitions website are actually pretty good, to be honest. But part of the issue is that a lot of the information that's being sought, and I referred to this one earlier, was firearms and acreage. That's only just come out.
Yeah,
it's changing.
And then also something like that kind of isn't even in the legislation. That's obviously been produced, but
what's that come from even? I don't know. But it's
that's
extraordinarily helpful. It's been extraordinarily helpful that it's come out because it answers the questions. But there are obviously other questions that we still don't have the answers for. But I mean, they have been good where they've actually come out because they have taken the legislation and at least put it in a relatively succinct, understandable form for that specific scenario, but it doesn't help if your scenario is not covered.
Can I just add?
Sorry.
May I just add to that as well? I do find the basic stuff is being answered, but it's the in-depth things. For example, we have a lot of confusion about who can issue hunting permits. Is it the leaseholder on leaseholder property, or is it traditional owners? Because a lot of that neither side really knows what they're allowed to do. I've actually written quite a few letters to the minister, who then, it takes about 2 months to get response. I talk to Ken pretty regularly. For example, I know the legislation quite well. I'm getting responses from the police, which is basically the legislation, and it doesn't answer the question. I've thrown it by other solicitors to say, does this mean that traditional owners can issue licences, or does it mean that it's only leaseholders? They don't know either. So the answers that we're getting from the police are just quoting legislation without interpretation of it. So, and this is really good for the basic stuff, but as you're saying, the legislation is exceptionally complex and there are a million scenarios for every part of it. And that's where we need definite layman's terms answers, which we're just not getting, which is where the misinformation is coming from.
The people I feel most sorry for in this whole debacle, and it is a debacle, is the people that the police have employed to work in Cannington and answer the questions. They've doubled the number of them, but they've been swamped with emails they can't answer, and you can't get through on the phone. If you do, if you've got 125 people, guess what? You're putting 125 different answers to some questions. And we're seeing that we're an advisory group, and we're saying, someone's saying, "Oh, we were told this," and the police are going, "No, that's not right." Well, you're always going to have interpretation issues, and even getting through to the people, getting through an email answered, and those poor people have just been under the pump and just get hammered, and they are trying to interpret this grey, murky mess and trying to advise people, trying to contact them. It's just been horrendous.
Mostly you don't get an answer.
Sorry, I'm just going to ask now for if anybody has any closing statements, just being mindful of the time. And if I could ask that your closing statements are new information. Thank you. You've provided us a lot of information and detail both today and in your submissions. But if anyone has any additional information that they'd like to provide by way of a closing statement.
Yep.
Ms. Christian.
If I may. One of the issues that has been raised is the single shot versus semi-automatic, where for pest control, particularly in areas where we need to do either aerial eradication of they're not accessible by ground, single shot doesn't allow us to do a clean kill. It will result in a long and protracted death of the vermin, which then has its own biosecurity issues plus animal welfare issues, where rapid fire is actually required or semi-automatic is required to actually get a clean shot. You can't do a headshot unless you're a very good shot, from aerial. And we do need to do the aerial eradication for biosecurity reasons, for herd management reasons, and for environmental reasons as well. If I can just summarise we've just got 5 things which we recommend is amending the disqualification provisions to reflect the nature of the offence, not the maximum sentence, ensuring character is considered in assessments, removing the burden of mental health determinations from medical profession, reintroduction of licensing for rapid fire and semi-automatic firearms for pastoralists, and restoring an avenue of appeal for exceptional cases. And I'm going to add a 6th one just after today, implementing a good faith clause. So they're our key issues.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Marshall.
Probably the only thing I haven't raised that was new information is on some discussion with some veterinarians. We did not address tranquiliser guns in our written submission, but some members do use them, so we would want those included, and I have printed my 6 copies.
Mine have been distributed.
Sorry, they have to go down as table paper number 1. Can you tell us what that is?
So that's a summary.
Needs to record it.
Sure. So that's a summary of what I've discussed. Basically, the key points that we've discussed.
Yeah. And if I can add to that, I also provided the 6 copies outside, so that will also need to be tabled.
Okay.
No, you can't just provide it outside.
Well,
that has to be tabled in here.
Sorry, I asked the lady and she took them from me.
I'm sorry, but this is a formal hearing which is being televised and recorded by Hansard. If you want to include something which is additional to what you provided already, then it has to be tabled here.
Oh, I asked her and she said she'd take them,
I'm sorry,
so,
but she's not a member of the committee.
okay.
Just
So
quickly,
do
if
you have
you
a
want
copy?
me to formally highlight.
You don't need to have 6 copies, 1 copy is enough to table.
Can I give you a ratty copy?
Sure. Yep.
Sorry, I was just following what the instructions
you've got
were
that.
on
No,
it.
no, that's, yeah.
You do have them. Thank you.
But yeah, the outcomes we were seeking, that registered veterinarians and veterinary businesses are able to readily obtain and utilise firearms of an appropriate calibre and type for the euthanasia of animals. That registered veterinarians and veterinary businesses be able to readily obtain and utilise tranquiliser guns for the sedation of animals, and that there be minimal, if any, restriction on the places and locations that veterinarians may use firearms for the euthanasia or sedation of animals. And then, in my separate personal submission, determine a mechanism that provides protection from prosecution to any individual who holds a firearms licence where that person uses a firearm to euthanize an injured or diseased animal with the primary aim of relieving its suffering, and the firearm is used in a safe and appropriate manner, but that the use of the firearm in some way contravenes the authority of their licence.
Thank you.
Chair, we do have the Kimberley one
Oh,
as
okay.
well.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So do we need you want a motion
That will
to
be
table?
table paper number 2.
Thank you.
Oh, you don't need a motion.
Well, I'd just like to reiterate that the Pastoralists and Grazers Association feels this legislation needs to be just binned and reworked and started with proper consultation with the people who know what they're talking about. One thing that hasn't been brought up when we were talking about weapon specifications and stuff for different jobs, as a pastoral lessee, I'm allowed to have 10 firearms to manage my business, vermin and euthanizing stock. I'm not allowed to let my employees use their own licensed firearms if they've got them on my property. They have to use mine. I'm left-handed. My bolt-action rifles are left-handed. So from an animal welfare point of view, that comes out very badly for a person who's right-handed to shoot. Equally, they're set up for my eyes. They're not set up for other people's eyes. So do I really want someone changing the $2,000 scope on top of my rifle every time it borrows my gun? I think there needs to be some flexibility in the regulations. They really need to be re-examined and certainly revisited with more flexibility and more room for appeal.
Oh, thank you. Mr Maguire?
Well, I'll go a bit more general. With WA Farmers, we engage with government on lots of issues. We are here today not because of you, but because Parliament didn't do its job.
Sure.
Okay? We should have been doing this a year ago, discussing regulations while they're in draft form. We've seen this with cultural heritage laws as well. They had to be reduced because Parliament did not do its job. It did not review the legislation properly. We asked the government evidence-based policy. We want to reduce red tape and we want proper, meaningful consultation. That is not happening, and that is why we're ending up here, and that is why we're ending up with these debacles. There is a clear process for Parliament to follow. Discussion paper, what's the government trying to achieve, draft legislation, then the legislation, draft regulations, and then the regulations. If we had followed that process, we wouldn't be here today, and we wouldn't be spending millions and tens of millions of dollars trying to fix the mess. So, please, and it is the job of all parliamentarians, no matter what colour you are, to make sure that ministers and departments are held to account, and then they do evidence-based policy, reduce red tape, and proper, meaningful consultation. So I'm pleased asking you as parliamentarians and your friends, hold the ministers and departments to account. Please.
Thank you. Mr Steele?
Yes, look, the WA Traders Association, we're the front face of a lot of the firearms issues and the unprecedented contact by the 85,000 firearms owners who are generally worried and stressed that they are in fact the target of government action while they're being law-abiding is of great concern. This broad population of people transcends all socio-economic types, all age groups and all cultures and genders. And I think you'd be hard-pressed, honestly, to find a group of people from such varying diversity backgrounds that shared one common interest that would give so little trouble to law enforcement and the government. We thank you for this time that we've had today, and we look forward to hopefully working towards a better solution.
Thank you. Thanks.
Did I?
And I do thank you all very much, not just for attending today, but also your very comprehensive submissions. I appreciate that you've consulted with your members and your other stakeholders, and we really appreciate your time and the expertise and the experience that you've put into the submissions and to the hearings today. If we could please end the broadcast.